Hey, welcome to a very, very special edition of Indie Love. Today, we are going to be talking about a little indie game called 1000 Cuts. Think one hit, one kill, 2D, pixel art, Sekiro. So, I recently had the opportunity to talk to Donald, the project lead writer and the lead dev, as well as Blue, who is the lead artist of Banjo Toad Studio. Donald and Blue are first-time game creators, so we talk everything from how the studio was formed to how the game came about, the inspiration behind it, and everything that comes with becoming solo indie developers. If you would like to dive into a particular chapter, you can go ahead and jump over here now, but otherwise, kick back, relax, and jump into a fantastic interview with Donald and Blue from Banjo Toad Studios.
So Banjo Toad Studio started with, actually, you know what, we're going to roll the clock back a little bit. If you guys remember the COVID shutdown, a bunch of our friends, we really wanted to get into something creative, but we couldn't hang out in person. And so we were trying to find something we could do as a kind of creative outlet. We all tried our own hand at different things. Blue was selling stickers for a minute. I wrote a book. A bunch of other people, some of my friends tried to do these like bubble short films where everybody got together for like a month and just never left an apartment and shot a movie. But ultimately we landed on this idea of doing video games as something that could kind of exist outside of a brick and mortar environment where you have to see people face to face. And then right as soon as we came up with the idea, the shutdown ended and we all went back to work. So we kind of pocketed the idea for a few years. And then, funny enough, it was 2023, there was this big writers' strike, the WGA strike and the actors' strike, which shut the film industry down for, it was 5 months. People were without work, and not all of us are film industry people, but we definitely, a lot of the foundation of Banjo Toad comes from people who are at least tangentially related to film. So suddenly a lot of us were just without work and idle hands. It can be really hard to go from working like a 12, 14, 16-hour day to just like be living with yourself in a house, and you're like, oh man, I've got to do something, otherwise like you're gonna paint all the walls and like just go nuts. So that's really what kicked us into high gear. It was like, okay, now we have the time and the energy, and we can sort of focus it in a direction. So Banjo Toad Studio came out of that, like the vacuum of like, okay, we've got some talent, we've got some time, and we've got some energy. We can do the thing now, or at least try to learn to do the thing, because we'd never done anything even close to anything like this. We'd never done anything like video games or board games or traditional games. Obviously, we've played games, like a very avid Magic the Gathering player. I don't know if anybody out there is a big MTG guy, but I'm there. I love this like weird little video game called Hunt Showdown that nobody but me plays. Yeah, so we sort of spent most of our time in the beginning there just like pulling ourselves up from our bootstraps in the education world. We were like, okay, how do we make what are game engines? We've heard Unreal, we've heard of Unity, we've heard of Godot or Godot, whatever you prefer. But it was like, okay, we need to learn. You can't ask the question if you don't know the question. So you need to learn what you don't know, if that makes sense. And so much of what we've done so far is that like learning what we don't know, so then we can answer the question. The name is kind of an interesting story. This was actually an early fight I think we had, which was like, I was like, I want it to be Latin. I want it to be something, I was like Ad Nauseam Games, Ad Nauseam Studio, just because this idea of like, it's
super slick and cool.
Yeah. It's also a Magic the Gathering card, as Ad Nauseam. Gotcha. But I was like, I think it'd be fun, and everyone was like, that's a horrible idea. Latin is a terrible, don't do that thing. And ultimately after, it was like a day, I think. Blue, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like genuinely one of the longest creative processes was like coming up with the short list and then paring the short list down and then landing on Banjo Toad Studio.
I would say it is one of the we generally have come together as a group very easily.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have a whole lot of significant conflicts. But this one was one where we just we could not agree.
Yeah.
Like, it never came down to a fist fight or anything like that, but we were like, we need to figure something out. And all three of us had one that we were like, we really like this name, but then we were like, maybe this isn't the name. And yeah, it was funny. A whole day.
And then once we landed on BanjoToad, there was
me.
a whole second thing for studio, because it was like they were like, "Oh, we should do studios."
Whether it's studio or studios.
And I was like, "No, we're not big enough to be studios, okay? Like Universal Studios, Paramount Studios, these are institutions. They've got like many places, literally, like they've got several studios around. We don't even have one place. We can't be studios yet." And I think there was a little bit of Studio Ghibli in there, too, where we were like, okay, we're just singular studio. And that still gets us into trouble, because we'll find out people are sending emails over to BanjoToad Studios at Gmail, and they're like, oh, did you ever get our email? Yeah. And we were like, no, where'd you send it? And they were like, a week later, they'll be like, oh, it bounced because of the mystery S. And I'm like, sorry about that, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think
you got to grab both domains.
We'll get them both.
And then,
quick to go. Go to Squarespace. Let's go.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, do you remember what some of the other options were?
Man.
This is me just more so being genuinely curious.
Ad nauseum. There was in Arcadia Ego, or Arcadia, which is Latin for even in paradise I exist. But Arcadia, I liked this idea of like paradise, Arcadia, arcade, like the game situation. Yeah. They thought it was too heady.
Like
that. You know what? They were totally right. That was a really dumb idea.
Well, I was trying to think of, as the person who does the art and the pixel art, like if you've ever played the game, or if you see our little icon for most of our social media and stuff, it is a Toad playing a banjo. My whole goal was, it needs to be some kind of image that is unique and engaging, so when people see it, they know exactly what it is. So my first was beetles on bikes, because I really wanted to draw a beetle riding a bike down a thing, and so mine was very beetle simple bike. And I think it was actually Dash. Who came up with BanjoToad.
I think you're right.
Partly from you, Donald, like you were the inspiration because you play the banjo and you love toads.
That's true.
So it was based on you, but I think it was Dash who came up with it initially.
No, you're definitely right, and I think it was either Dash had a sticker or something, and was just like, it was like a frog banjo situation,
with a toad with a
yeah, and so
it was a frog banjo situation.
It emerged.
That doesn't look anything like our logo, but is similar in concept. And it was just a standalone sticker. He saw that was cool, and we thought, oh, that would actually be great.
But yeah, Beetles. Was it Beetle Bike? I think it was just Beetle Bike.
It was Beetle Bike, or it might have just been Beetle Bike. Beetle Bike Studio.
Beetle Bike. And honestly, we should get that one too. That one's going to be like, the parent company can be BanjoToad, but we're going to get Beetle Bike too. It's just going to be a series of like
animal object.
Yep.
Object. Yeah. But the good news is, once you get Beetle Bike, then you can actually add the S, because now you're multiple studios. You're off to the races.
Mike, you got it.
It's all full circle.
We got to get Mike on the creative team. Let's go, Mike. Come on.
So I guess speaking of the team, and maybe it's a good segue here. So obviously, Donald, we have Blue. Talk to us about the other members. So it's both of you, and then we also have Dash and Megan, right? Those are kind of the four key characters, players, if you want, within the BanjoToad universe.
I can kind of describe the hierarchy of systems for all of us. So Donald is the project lead, 100%. The only reason this project exists is because of him. He was the one that said it'd be cool to make a video game. He was the one that said it'd be cool to make a video game. He was the one that said, no, we're going to buckle down and actually do it. Because I think a lot of people will say, oh, it'd be really cool to do this, and then it kind of falls by the wayside, and it did for us for a little bit, and then he brought it back, but he is the project lead. He does most of the concept art, he does most of the writing, a lot of the world building. Obviously the historical references are almost all on him. He's also the one who comes in and says, that looks too European, take that out of there, and then I have to go in and I have to correct what I made.
That's true.
But you do that. But he's the one, and he also does a lot of the base coding for the game. He actually learned coding specifically for this. He never touched it before this game started. And he's got his fingers in all the pies.
That was a mistake, yeah.
It's tough. But he's got his fingers in all the pies, essentially. I'm the lead artist. All of the pixel art that you see in the game is stuff that I have done, everything from the UI to the actual character sprites. almost all of the stuff that you'll see on our social media is stuff that I have created. So I do all of the visuals pretty much. And I do a little bit of help with the writing, but not at all with the
oh yeah, hey,
not at all with the coding. Oh, that's us.
But you also made that typeface.
So that
also,
is,
the fonts
I did.
in game.
I did.
Yep.
I made several fonts that we could use. I did all of that kind of stuff. And then Dash is the more professional coder in terms of knowing what he's actually doing. Like, he was coding well before we started making this game, just as a passion project for him. He is, unlike Donald and I, he does not work full-time, so he doesn't have time to do all of the coding stuff. So he kind of taps in whenever there's something that Donald just doesn't know how to touch. He goes, I have no idea how to do this very difficult thing, so Dash is going to take care of that. And then Meg is actually my sister, and she is the one who does a lot of our social media outreach. She does a lot of the coordinating with content creators such as yourself. And then we have a couple of external people who aren't technically BanjoToad Studio people who help us out. Like, we've got a friend, Arta, who's going to be doing the original soundtrack for us.
Arta Wren.
And we've got someone who does Arta Wren. And we've got some people who are going to do some non-pixel art promotional materials, that sort of thing. But
Matthias,
the main core group is Matthias, and the main core group is the four of us.
Very cool. And just before we move on, I do have to give a very special shout out to Dash. And when I was reading through the your Steam page, there's the little snippet that he programmed Mike Tyson's Punch Out on a T186 calculator, and or T184 I should say. Punch Out being my favorite game of all time. So when I saw that, I was like,
we'll tell him you said that. That was like he's like, that's like a major point of pride. He was like, oh yeah, I like totally flunked out all these classes because I was on the T84 putting the Punch Out in, and I was like, oh, it makes sense. Yeah, okay, got it. Yeah, that's why you're working with us. That's
a guy. That's someone you want on your side. That's someone you want on your team. Amazing. All right, so we have the studio, we have the name. We have the friendship, of course. That is the most important. Talk to us about the game, and I guess Donald, this is probably going to get thrown into your realm. But what is the concept behind it? How did you come up with kind of this world, this concept, this game design?
So it was kind of like they came super fast. It was all like a kind of crazy weekend, okay, where we were like. I was like, okay, I think a game would be super fun. I think, what are the things that I really like? I was on a big samurai kick. I've been on a big samurai kick for, a good 2.5 decades.
Years.
But I must have seen a movie. It must have been like Twilight Samurai or 13 Assassins. I must have seen a movie like that weekend, and I'd been like, okay, the game's going to be a samurai game. And we were playing a lot of, like, I want to say it was Borderlands 3, like, New Game Plus. And it's like all the enemies were super spongy. And I was like, forget this. Like, I want one-hit kill. I want the samurai game. I want the one-hit kill. And they kind of folded in, like, right there, just locked it in. It was like, okay. I don't know how familiar you are with like some classic samurai movies, but there's a lot of these like Kurosawa Mifune collaboration movies. You just see like Mifune like pulls the sword out, just kills one hit, and everybody, famously there's this movie Sandra at the end where he like does this crazy underhanded reverse cut with his left hand, and it's like this giant blood explosion. And I was like, okay, one hit kill, samurai, done. And then it was probably like the morning after we'd locked in that idea that we were like, the title, 1000 Cuts, came as like a joke. It was like this idea of like, oh, we don't want the game where it's death by 1,000 cuts. Oh, yeah, okay. There we go.
Here we do.
So that was, we didn't have anything about the lore or we didn't have anything at all before that. And then once we had the title and the concept, we were like, okay. And then it all just snowballed from there, this idea of like, okay, who are these 1,000 guys you've got to kill? Obviously, it's got to be this big, giant, crazy, horrible army, this army of 1,000 lore, just kind of, it emerged from there, and then what are the consequences of killing 1,000 people? I think that pretty much goes over the core idea of, like, how it started and how it came about. And this idea of just, like, there are a lot of half ideas that come together to make a whole idea, And so we had a lot of half ideas that very rapidly formed this cohesive concept. Or I hope it's cohesive. I don't know.
Relatively professional, relatively cohesive.
Yeah, from there, it's so funny. I'd been like, oh, I don't want to write anything fantasy. I'm not a super big it's not really my genre to enjoy, you know? Like, I obviously love the Lord of the Rings movies, and I was listening to the Game of Thrones audiobooks at the time, which are fantastic. If you like audiobooks, you got to check out the Game of Thrones ones. It was kind of like, oh no, we've got to do something fantasy for this, you know? And so it answers questions like, okay, what's the consequence of killing these 1,000 people? And then we start thinking about this idea of like making these interactions matter, right? So that became the next idea. This consequential interaction, right, became like a super core element of the design process. We were like, okay, how do we make every interaction matter, right? And so the first one was like, okay, all the enemies, they're people. Every single one's a person. Yeah. They all have names now. We're going to make it way harder on ourselves. We're just going to, because, you know, that dude there, that, like, who just runs away when you kill all of his buddies, he has a name. And all these other guys now have names, and they all have interconnected backstories. If you play the demo, or if you play Jamaku, you'll be like, oh, wait a minute, this person is referencing when this other guy stole his rice ball, and then later on you meet the dude who stole the rice ball, and you're like, oh, you kind of are a bully. Like, yeah, I don't really like you. And the idea of the one-hit kill also to reinforce this idea of like, okay, none of these interactions just feel like a waste. You know, they all feel like there's weight to this particular moment. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, it does. And I guess when you were in the concept phase of creating this world and everything else, did you go in knowing about like, okay, I want maybe the difficulty branch of if you want what I'm guessing to be is the right story, as in you don't kill your uncle and your mentor, or please, Blue, jump in here.
Can I field this? I have a question. Donald says I can field it. I have a question for you, Mike. Is it okay if I do a little bit of a spoiler on the demo?
Please, yes, please. Let's before asking that, maybe let's give the listeners a quick update of like the what are we talking about, and then we dive in.
Okay. So we're just talking about the story of the story of the game, but like specifically right now the story of the demo and how that kind of created itself. Because as anybody who plays the demo, you will find out that your name is Hiro, and you are a exiled son of a daimyo who lives at his Uncle Jiro's dojo and has been studying the sword for most of your young adult life. And the narrative essentially begins when you find out that your grandfather, who is the leader of your clan, has been murdered, and that the suspected murderer is your uncle who has raised you. And so you are faced with this moral question of, do I seek my uncle out, execute him for what he is suspected of doing, or do I trust him and trust that I believe he is innocent and spare him? And that is kind of the moral question that you are faced. And that was not actually initially a part of the game. The initial version of the game was going to just be, you kill everybody. You don't have a moral choice.
There's no question.
You take the sword, you kill them. There's no question, you just do it. And this is the spoiler part. So if you take the sword and you kill everyone, and you get to Uncle Jiro, you actually die. It is not, you don't kill Jiro. You go through the entire thing thinking that that's what's going to happen, but what actually happens is he kills you. And then for the rest of the game, you actually play as Uncle Jiro. So you kind of, you come up this, assuming that you're playing the main character of the game for the entire, what ends up being the tutorial area of the game where you're learning about new enemies and things. But you actually are not, if you choose that moral route. Awesome. And then we decided as we were building it, we thought, actually it would be, number one, we want different difficulty routes, and it's obviously difficult to determine how to make difficulty if the whole process of the game is you die in one hit, and so does everyone else. So trying to figure out a way to allow players to choose a difficulty turned into this could also be a moral choice as well. So you can either choose the easy path, which is the one hit, one kill, which is arguably easy or not, or the the harder route, which is the easy route, or the certainly harder route, which is you're stunning and then knocking unconscious all of your enemies instead. And when we decided to give that a route, we thought, well, that if you're doing that, then there's no reason that Uncle Jiro would want to kill you. So I guess that you can, in fact, survive if you play that way. So that's like the big twist ending at the end of the demo. If you choose the lethal route, which was the original only gameplay route at first, that you just die.
It's like this oh shit moment.
But then when we decided to. Yeah, where you go, oh my god, I just died. Wait a second, because your character falls, and I think sometimes people will expect the death blood splatter, so you have to go back and go like, oh, what did I do wrong? But that doesn't happen, because that's just what the narrative is if you choose that route, then you don't make it. Which I think is a super cool way to do it. Yeah, you messed up, buddy.
But yeah, and I think I want to say that specifically that choice, we've been calling it a boken, but it's a bakken is the technical correct pronunciation. The wooden training sword that you can pick. I want to say there's this great movie that came out about 20 years ago called Twilight Samurai, which I highly recommend anybody who likes samurai movies to go and watch. There's a fantastic sequence about halfway through the movie where the main character, Twilight, played by Hiroyuki Sanada, he's had to sell his longsword, right? And so pretty much the long sword that he uses is just this piece of wood, basically. It's a piece of bamboo shaped like a sword. And he has to defeat a guy whose honor's been besmirched. I feel like there's a lot of besmirching honor.
Very common.
And he defeats him with this wooden sword. And so I was like, as soon as we were thinking about like, okay, what would difficult look like? What would hard look like in a one-hit kill game? That definitely a lot of Twilight Samurai in that choice. Not to name drop too hard. Yeah.
Amazing. Even just getting ready for all of this is just checking out even just old trailers for like Shaolin versus.
Oh yeah, there you go.
All of the old classics.
See, that's classic stuff. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big Wu-Tang Clan fan, so everything kind of fits very nicely into all of this. And just to again put a bow on the difficulty selection, I know for me as someone coming into the game, and also someone like I'm not good at the like good, like one hit kill kind of like
me neither.
those types of games. So I went in on the easy difficulty, which is I did take the sword.
Good.
And again, easy is very quotational because I got my ass kicked.
Easy is arguable.
Yeah, I got my ass kicked many times. But then Brandon,
less hard, but still very hard.
Yeah, and then Brandon, our resident expert of like Soulsborne games, he went and took the hard mode, and where you have to go and kind of clear the room of downing everyone, and then that counts as you taking the room. But I just thought it was an awesome way. The moral choice of it was an awesome way because, again, as a story goes, it's like, of course I want to save Uncle Jiro. Like that, it's like, you know what I mean? Just when you're exiled, and then from there being able to have that person to rely on who trained you, who's there for you, and then the other way is like, oh, I have to go back to the asshole who exiled me.
I think it's so funny because like we've had a number of creators play the game, or content creators play the game, and just people in general, and so often they'll pick the no kill route, you know. And I'm like, why? Like, we did all these cool blood splatters, and like we have this cool ending of like, you want to do the kill route. Trust me, it's gonna be so much fun. And everybody's like, but Uncle Jiro, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I can't.
Why? Yeah. Well, the thing about that is, Donald, is you made the dialogue feel very much like you need to choose the no kill route, because the dialogue the entire time is either like
garbage.
Yeah.
The
dialogue is all either be the evil bad guy who kills everybody, or be the good guy who's really nice and everybody loves. Okay. And he goes, why did everybody choose that route?
I'm gonna make it more nuanced why would they? Just from this conversation. I'm gonna make it really vague. It's gonna be really like morally muddy. The next people playing the game from now on are gonna be like, what?
No. So actually, in the current demo, so we update the demo that's available on Steam pretty regularly, and we actually had a pretty big update that came out recently, and one of the updates that we had was make it such that you could choose whether you wanted to do the full tutorial version, which is, as you know, because you played the demo, relatively text heavy, you know, and there's a lot of dialogue and background stuff, which some people are really into, but other people aren't, and because we wanted people to be able to jump right into the action if they either chose one route and wanted to try the other one, or if they just didn't care about the story, or if, for any reason they were just wanted to get right into it. That version actually just gives you a text box that says, these are your two choices, and that one is way more neutral in terms of which is the right choice, because that one has the okay, you choose loyalty to your uncle, you believe he didn't kill them, you defend him, or you choose loyalty to your father, you believe your uncle did kill them. So it's much less clear in that box, in a good way. It's much less clear whether or not Jiro is guilty, whether or not you believe Jiro is guilty, as opposed to in the regular text of the story, which is very clearly like, the government is blaming your uncle, but he did not do it.
It's like, yeah, these the council situation is like not stacked in his favor. Let's just say. They're like, oh, this Uncle Jiro guy, we gotta get rid of him.
Yeah, we just don't like him.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. I think that answers all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's perfect. Sure. And Donald, do you have from a story perspective, is everything written, everything kind of finished, or as you guys are continuing to develop the game, are you in the team kind of figuring out, all right, what's the best way to navigate all of this?
We spent a long time actually like throwing spaghetti at the wall for the different acts we wanted to do, because we were like, okay, we know we want to structure this like a traditional no play or like a traditional kabuki situation, right? And if you play through the demo, you'll see like the names of the acts come from like introduction, destruction, haste is like, that's very, intentionally kabuki and no inspired. So we were like, okay, we know it's going to be a limited number of acts, the base game, right? It's like 5 at most, probably closer to 4. And so we were like, okay, what settings do we want to do? And so a lot of it was like, what's the progression gonna feel like in terms of player experience, in terms of what's fun just for us to do? And we were like, okay, we definitely we want to show places that don't really get a lot of visibility in media. We want to show, weapon types and martial art styles that don't really get a lot of representation. And so that kind of ultimately, it was a 50-50 mix, right? Where we were like, I mean, we could expand this forever. We can make this as big as we want. But ultimately, the very bare bones, we've got to be super intentional about it. So that's how we landed on this idea of like, okay, so you've got to go from the mountain dojo, which is in a super rural area, and you've got to go all the way to the center of basically the capital city of this particular region, to go to the first castle, which is like the number one biggest castle, which is where, the seat of power basically in this fictional part of Japan exists. And so we were like, okay, so let's, like an easy line for that is like, we just urbanize over time, right? So we start in the super rural, we go through some super like unrefined like forest shrine situation. We go into this village that's been abandoned and taken over by bandits. Then we go into the city. Then finally we reach the castle. So that was like a pretty early decision in terms of the narrative, where you can see like, okay, you're literally going from outside to inside, And then we realized it would be fun to do like a cohesive day-night situation where we were like, okay, so we're gonna start, everything's pretty grounded and motivated, right? So it's like the evening of the first day is when you get confronted with this idea of like, okay, so the grandfather's assassinated, the council said, it's your Uncle Jiro, you need to make this decision. Then that night is when the confrontation happens. The next morning is when you reach the village. The next, sundown is when you confront the bandit lord in charge, who's this super fierce ogre lady with this giant axe. And a big skull that she sits on. And then at that night, you finally reach the city, right, where you're a fugitive. Okay, so you can't just walk through the city normally, because at this point they know, they're like, okay, this dude's probably coming to kill us. So it forces you to scale this, the Rashomon gate, right, which is this big gate at the edge of the city. And now you've got to scale through rooftops to avoid getting detected by all the the constables and the police, in this Kuragawa city. And so you're hiding from these ninjas, which are of course the ninjas are there on the rooftops, because where else would ninjas be? And there are these kami and yokai too, because it's a low fantasy world. Obviously there's tengu, and which are kind of bird-like goblins, and they're obviously ogres, and a giant toad, who's only 400 years old, which is not that old in the scale of this game.
In the scale of this game,
yeah.
No.
And then finally at that night, as you finally reach the moat and the castle wall, which has fallen into this disrepair, right? Because it's been hundreds of years since hundreds of years of peace. Basically, there's been no war in Japan really for 250 years, basically, by the time this setting starts. And even before that, the conflicts that were happening really weren't not to the scale of the Sengoku era. So the wall itself is under repair. Because the new your uncle has taken over, right? He's the new leader of the clan, and his whole goal is to usher in this new sort of pseudo Sengoku warring states period. And so he's building up his defenses. He's got this scaffolding going on to repair the wall. It's the morning of, and then finally, I'm not going to spoil too far, but once you get to the wall of the castle, the only place to go is into the castle. So in terms of storylines, that narrative is pretty much the same regardless of if you initially chose honor and loyalty, right? Either honor, choosing the sword to kill everybody, or loyalty to your uncle and not kill everybody. Because either way, you've got to get to the first castle to confront the uncle one way or the other. If you choose honor and die, then playing as Uncle Jiro, you get the additional choice. You get the choice a second time. If you players who play the kill route, seeing Hiro die, we realized would be kind of tragic, and we didn't want to lock players into only doing the kill route if they were oh man, we see the consequences of our actions, we want to learn. So from there, the choice switches from honor and loyalty to redemption or revenge, basically, where Jiro can then choose, you can choose as Jiro, to take the sword now, which has been delivered to you by your nephew, who you just killed, and go kill everybody, or use his own wooden sword and go, teach everybody the meaning of, hey, don't give my sword a nephew, don't give my nephew a sword. This is what you get for being mean. But either way, you've got to go. Yeah. Either way, you've got to go to the castle. Either way, you've got to confront the existing power structure in this particular state, basically.
Very cool.
But what happens when you get there, depending on what choices you've made, are radically different. Especially considering that there's a bit of a Chekhov's gun where the sword, the Dragon's Fang, is not just a regular sword. It has a number of potential origins explored in lore drops in the dojo. One of them is that it's forged from the iron bones of this dragon. One of the three dragons. I don't know how familiar you are with the Japanese creation myth, but at one point a god kills one of his kids, and the blood that runs down the sword forms into three different dragons, and one of those three dragons is not very nice. And so one of the potential origins of this sword is, maybe it was forged from the iron bones of that dragon. But another explanation is maybe that dragon is trapped in that there sword, and that if you kill 1,000 people, something bad might happen. So, So yeah, the endings are currently there are 3 endings. But cool. In our Kickstarter, we've actually got, I think, two endings currently additional. One is just a straight-up different ending by itself, playing as either Hiro or Jiro. And there's actually the second stretch goal ending is involving a totally different playable character, but we're not going to get too deep into that. We don't want to spoil too much.
as you can see, we've got a lot of there's a lot of world building going on in his Donald's been living in Kuragawa City for this entire creation of this game. Like he's got it all. He could write books on the lore that's going on.
I'd have to do one book which is like, this
cool.
is the historical references, and then another book which is like, and this is all the things that we got totally wrong, but because it's cool.
The Donald edition.
The rule of
Donald
cool,
cut.
which
the
is like,
edition.
the
rule of cool edition.
We're at the point where we're having conversations with people, and they're like, oh, so this character uses a nagamaki, right? The long wrap weapon, where the hilt is the same length as the blade. But, if you're setting it in 1849, they would have cut them down by then. And it's like, yeah, there's also yokai and kami and demons and dragons. So I can set something from the 1400s and the 1800s because it's not real. Which is very funny.
That's awesome.
It is a lot of fun though to try and have because we obviously we're taking some liberties with the world building aspect of it, but we did want it to be as historically engaging as possible for people who actually know that history or are interested in that history. We didn't want it to just be generically set in it's in Japan, I guess.
Japan
we
TM,
wanted it to feel Japan TM. We wanted it to really feel like something that if you know anything about that topic, you can go, I know exactly where that weapon's from. I know exactly who these, I know what this is referencing. I know why that character's name is that because I know about the historical character, the historical person that it was referencing.
We were at DreamHack in Dallas, and somebody came up and was like, you spent way too much time on this. And I was like, yeah.
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
yes,
that's pretty much the response that we got that we love. That is like one of the best responses we could possibly get, where people are like, "You put too much effort into this," and we go, "Yep,
like,
we did."
That's amazing. And Blue, I guess so. As Donald is creating this world and these characters and everything, I guess talk me through talk me through your process of bringing all of this to life, right? Like you're the one to create the characters, and I know Donald showed his sketch before of here's a rough Donald version of it, but now let's make it a proper one. So again, I would love to learn more about the creations of the character, the worlds, from more of the art side of it all.
Absolutely. So we actually went through a couple of we went through a variety of different iterations on character designs, how we wanted players to look, how we wanted, because like I'd mentioned before, I'd never done pixel art before this, so I was working a little bit at a disadvantage there because you kind of have to deal with a low pixel count to try and figure out the best way to engage with animation and also just engage with unique character design, because I didn't want to make something that looked too much like a game that already exists, but I wanted to do something that felt very it makes sense that this is meant to be pixel art. You'll notice that I think aside from maybe one or two characters, nobody has eyes in the game. There are no faces because it's such a small pixel count that it's the focus of endearing you to the character and making them look visually engaging is detracted if we spend too much time with small details like facial expressions. So all of the expressive aspects of the characters is based more on how they move and how they behave. The old version of Hero that was live in the demo version actually was dressed in a purple robe, and the newest version he's wearing a green gi, which is a little more historically accurate than it was before, because before he was just wearing tan sweatpants, and now he's actually got gi pants on, and he's got his belt and his vest, and he's got the shaved hair and the bun, which I forget the name of. But all of the character designs, Donald and I have worked very closely on to kind of balance between what is historically accurate and what is visually engaging.
And what we can do in
for instance,
5
one
pixels.
Decision that we and what that we can do in a very small pixel count, yes, because this is about most of the sprite work is around 16 pixels in size, so it's relatively small. The player character is about 48 pixels tall, which is not a lot of space if you don't know a lot about pixel art. But once you get it, then it actually becomes a whole lot of space, and you have a lot to work with. But there were a lot of decisions that even now we are going back and we are making new decisions based on information that we've gotten and historical knowledge that we have gained from our many forays into Wikipedia and maybe other more.
And also just big community. So many people in the community will reach out. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's something that's super awesome. Is people who are passionate about this topic will reach out and say, "I love this topic. I have stuff to say," and we are like, "Please tell us everything. Give us all of the information that you have because we want to know." But an addition that we made art-wise later in the game, because if you've played I believe when you played the demo, it was before DreamHack, which was before we made a relatively large a large shift in how the enemies in the dojo were designed. So before the enemies in the dojo were redesigned, the colors of the gis were not based on anything in particular. They were just the low-cut enemy was wearing green because that way you know he's a low-cut enemy. And the high-cut enemy is wearing red because that way you know that he's a high-cut enemy. And it doesn't matter. But when we went further on, we learned that there are a kind of both China and Japan have these kind of color-coordinated systems for the various martial arts that they do. And we realized that there is a 5-color system in Japanese literature for different martial arts groups that include red, yellow, black, white, and red, yellow, black, white, and GRU, which is blue and green combined.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so you actually, if people who are familiar with the particular sword style that we're referencing in that part of the game will be able to say, oh, I know they're standing in like that particular sword stance and they're wearing yellow because that is the color that is associated with that sword stance. But then we take a little bit of liberties with that where there are characters who are wearing blue and then the main characters who are wearing green, which technically those were not
it's the color of the clan.
In that time period.
It's okay.
Very cool.
It's the color of the clan. We decided to go with that because it would be more visually engaging, so you could very quickly and clearly identify that guy's associated with me. Like, he's wearing green, that means he's got something to do with me specifically, as opposed to that guy's wearing blue, which means he's going to cut my legs off.
Yeah. And also, like, awesome. In addition to the kendo of it all for like enemy stances, there was also like a lot of the woodblock references, right? It was like that.
So are the specific colors, like the hex code colors that we've chosen, are largely based on woodblock prints. Some from the Edo period, some maybe not, but most of them from the Edo period that I actually like color picked from images from them, which is again one of those things where it's like you went a little too hard on this. You did not. Need to do all that.
It was like clothing styles too, and just like a bunch of other stuff, right? Because it was like so much of the how do we do authentic was pulling from like the primary sources, which were primary sources for like the 1800s and before are like, okay, they're woodblock prints, you know, they had photography, you know, toward the end there, and as Edo was kind of giving way to the restoration period, it was like, okay, so Western photography was coming in, but so much of the like, what do the gis look like? What do the sword racks look like? What do the buckets look like? Like all the little assets they all have somewhere a giant folder, you know, on the server, which is just like here are
the 16 types of teapots.
You're like, you literally, it's like, okay.
that they had back then.
And it was like, and even deeper than that, it was like, oh, the reason that they're heating their tea in the furo is because of the time of year, right? Because they're not using and it's like, too much.
So cool.
Yeah.
The ultimate rabbit hole.
I don't recommend doing that. For anyone interested in game development out there, just don't ever do that.
You don't need to go that crazy.
You don't need to.
Amazing. Okay, so I do want to jump into the community aspect, which I know you both brought up, as well as the Kickstarter, but I have one final question just about the development. And talk to me about the decision of the whole, I guess, like the resting / saving aspect of it. It's very Resident Evil, very Resident Evil style of you have a limited number of tea available to you, and the tea represents you being able to sit down, to rest and save your progress. Once again, anyone who's played Resident Evil, you have the old the typewriter with the ink system. So that was the first thing that kind of came to mind on that standpoint.
Exactly.
But I'm just, again, more so just curious about this mechanic and how did that come about.
Big Resident Evil 2 and 3 guy. But it was actually, this was Dash's idea. So originally, we just placed kind of Dark Souls bonfire style. We'd placed the tea in world where you'd find it and you could rest at it if you hadn't rested there before. And then Dash came up with the idea of how do we motivate players to investigate the bodies, right? Because it's like some people just don't care. They just want to kill everybody and leave, right? Which is, respectable. But it was like, oh, if we reward players by keeping like this limited resource there, and I was very anti the idea of like inventory systems, or like I was like, I don't really want people to like investigate for like $2 that you then spend at a store. That's just not the kind of game that this is going to be. So Dash was the one who was like, oh, we make the resting mechanic locked behind the T, this limited resource of T. That motivates players to learn, to investigate the bodies, right? And then also it gives them the ability to say like, oh, I want to stop now. Like, I'm not going to keep playing, past the point where I'm just not interested in playing. I need to go do other stuff. And it also, if somebody's like really struggling with like a boss run where they're like, oh, I don't want to respawn and then I have to go kill the same like 6 rooms worth of people to then get to the boss. It's like, oh, you can, save 2 of your T or whatever. Have 1 in your inventory if you can. When you realize where the boss is, rest there. Now you don't have that super long, So it was, Dash really came in clutch with that idea. I was like, oh man, you just solved like all the problems all in one.
Yeah.
And then the question became like, okay, how do we give players enough of this that they're not like, oh man, there's only 3 T, but also players, we started noticing as soon as we said it was a limited resource, they just wouldn't use it. They'd be like, I'm hoarding the T. And so,
that was me.
Yeah. So we're watching people.
And then they'd have 6 T when they got to the end of the boss. The last boss, they'd have 6 T, and we'd go, you didn't need to save all of it. You didn't need to save all of it.
Oh, your life would have been so much easier. And so it's like this Murphy's Law, right? Where they get the T, and then they go and they're like, do I rest here? I'll do 1 more room, and then I'll rest. And then they die in the next room.
And then they die.
I'm like, no. There's the heartbreak there.
It's a gambling situation.
Yeah. And that would, like, we hadn't even considered that as an element of the game, which I'm like, yeah, no, if Dash was here, he'd be cackling, because that was fully him, and I'm super happy that he came up with that idea.
Awesome. That is awesome. All right, so let's jump in. So at the time of this recording, Kickstarter is about to go live. We're I think just days away. I believe it's tomorrow.
Day away.
Yeah, tomorrow. So first off, once again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Both
Thank
of you.
you. Thank you.
So
excited.
A huge milestone. But talk to me about, I guess, maybe the decision to go the Kickstarter route, and also just some of the goals of the campaign and what people can expect if they wanted to jump in and kind of help support this project and help support both of you and the whole BanjoToad team.
So I could do why Kickstarter Blue if you want to do like some of the rewards.
And I can do the actual page for sure.
So the big thing. We were trying to decide early on if we wanted to go the publisher route, if we wanted to try to kind of fit the game into a sellable mold. And there's nothing wrong with this route, and there's it's totally legitimate. And I don't want to hate on anybody or attack anybody who's doing that, because super respect it. The big thing starting out, we were like, we want sort of final cut on this, right? It's like in the movie world, final cut is this huge thing people fight over. Stanley Kubrick was like, I'm not going to do a movie if I don't have final cut, right? David Fincher's the same way. He's like, I need final cut of the movie. And it's just being like, I want to make the thing that I want to make, right? And so Kickstarter allows us the freedom to be able to kind of operate inside of our own parameters. We can say, hey, we need to delay a few weeks to polish this up. That's like a horrible decision, but some studios I feel like are pushed into this idea, like looking at Cyberpunk, think about if they'd been given another like 6 months to polish it up, how amazing that launch could have been, So there's a lot of like nuts and bolts back end reasons why we were like, oh, it's super important to us to be able to say like, hey, this is something we really care about. This is something we're super passionate about. We want to be able to make what we think is the best decision for it across the board, like creatively and also, distribution wise. Like, we don't want to push out a product that's not ready. We don't want to like burn people. We want people to have a good time. Because ultimately, and I think a lot of people kind of lose track of this idea of like, with movies and TV and with games, it's like the fans are the most important, you know? Especially like looking at Marvel world where it's like, I feel like there's a lot of hate on the fans, and it's like, no, this is like, the fans are important. I'm a fan, you know? Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it's definitely a combo of those two things where it's like, we care about the relationship that we have with people who like this thing for whatever reason. I don't know why. And we also want to make sure that that we ourselves can like sleep at night because we're like, okay, yeah, we did the thing. Because somebody would be like, oh yeah, you need to, the one hit kill thing, that's got to go. It'd be like, well, so the thing is, like, that's the selling that's like a core part of the thing. Without that, this is just like any, I don't know, Streets of Rage ripoff. Well, not really, but, you know. So that was a big thing. And just in general, I think I love the idea of Kickstarter. I've wanted to do something. I think we've all wanted to do something there for a while. This idea of like, hey, we came together as a unit, we did this thing, we, like, everybody got into it, you know, and it's so much kind of baked in. It definitely
boosts community engagement.
Yeah, it's all kind of baked into the idea. It's very community-based. You know, it's very relationship-based. And it feels good to be able to be like, oh, hey, I haven't just backed stuff here. I made stuff here. Like, you know, like, my little Kickstarter account can be like, okay, however many backed and one created. And it's just going to be great. You know, it's going to feel really good. And so that's and in terms of like why, the first question answered why crowdfunding, but why Kickstarter specifically, you know, we did a lot of research. We were like, oh, what could be good, you know, GoFundMe or Kickstarter. And a lot of these decisions came from just talking with people. It was like, okay, talking with like the coordinator of Kickstarter Games, talking with, you know, what the relationships that we'd like to make with people long term. It's like, okay, you know, we are totally all in on 1,000 Cuts, right? But in 6 to 8 months, 1,000 Cuts will be finishing up, right, and we'll be on to the next one, and it's like, okay, what do we want to do then? We're probably going to do a board game next. Board games do super well on Kickstarter. We've got one successful Kickstarter. We know the Kickstarter games coordinator person now. We've got good relationships with, you know, Jellup, who's doing our digital marketing, is a Kickstarter partner. So it's like, this is kind of not a trial run necessarily, but it opens the door to additional opportunities and a relationship with Kickstarter's platform and their community specifically over something like a GoFundMe. It was just a lot of those things factored in finally to our decision, specifically why crowdfunding, specifically why Kickstarter. Does that make sense?
Very cool. Absolutely, it does. And of course the famous Miyamoto quote of a delayed game is eventually good,
exactly,
but a rushed game is forever bad, right?
Exactly.
And I think going back to the whole conversation of, you have a publisher, and a publisher has one thing in mind, and that is money, right? Where as opposed to, you have a vision, right? This is what you want to do. This is what you want to create. And I do agree with you. I think Kickstarter is the best way of being able to stay true to that vision. And as someone who is a huge fan of, like, look, if a game's not ready, leave it in the oven, right? Like, it's like, as much as I want to play Silk Song,
oh my god,
Hollow Knight,
don't
it's like
just let him cook, just let him cook, you know?
Yeah, it's just let him
when it's
cook.
ready, it's ready.
Exactly, and it's like, of course, like, it is a day one buy for me and everything else, but it's also like, I'm never gonna be mad of like, oh my god, you delayed it again, because it's like, again, there's a countless amount of games you can point to that aren't ready, and they get released because
I feel like we've all been burned, and you know, especially now,
we've all been burned. So Blue, and let you jump in on the, I guess, like the targets and the goals and kind of what people can expect on that standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're super excited to go live with our Kickstarter tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
We are like we mentioned before, we feel like we've got a pretty passionate, like, little community going on so far, but we recognize that it's a relatively small community at this point, so we're trying to be realistic with our minimum viable goal, which is to finish the game, because, you know, we made the demo, which is an hour and a half long, and it's free right now that people can play,
free
and
forever.
We're very happy that we could
never
do that,
not
but
free.
Free forever, yeah. The demo will never not be free. But the full game is, you know, it's going to be longer, it's going to take longer. Donald and I are doing this full time, and it's something that we've been funding on our own, then we just can't do it anymore. Like, if we want to make the game, then we just won't be able to do it without the support of community members and people who are interested in the game, which is another reason why we decided to go to Kickstarter now.
This is true. That's the why now of it.
that's the why now. Yeah, that's the why this moment. But the minimum goal, the base goal that we have is $10,000 to finish the smallest, simplest version of the game that finishes the narrative, that has all of the basic elements that we can't live without, like we absolutely want the city, we absolutely want the mountaintop village, we obviously need the first castle, like these are the elements that we cannot live without in order to have a full and complete game. And so that's going to be our minimum base goal of if we hit the $10,000 goal, then that is the game is complete, coming out as soon as it is ready to go. It's out. But we do have a lot of other things that we would absolutely love to include. That includes, like Donald had mentioned a while ago, we've got alternate endings, we've got an alternate playable character that we would love to introduce, we've got new areas that we would love to explore. Like there's like a sunken sunken temple in a swamp. There's a bunch of different areas that there's Death Storehouse. There's a lot of animation elements. Like there's a stretch goal that is just, I will double the number of death animations. Like it's just stretch goals that are absolutely add a lot to our plate, but are something that we would absolutely love to do if we had the finances to do so. And we'll reveal the stretch goals as the Kickstarter goes on over time. But aside from just the game that we want to release, we want people to have incentives to support us. So along with everything that's going to be on the Kickstarter page, which includes like a full breakdown of the game mechanics, a full breakdown of the story, we also have our reward tiers, which I think is what everybody who's going to be backing on Kickstarter really wants to know about. And our reward tiers go everywhere from the most simple, the most basic, which is just you get the game. You get a digital copy of the game on Steam.
You got it.
And yeah, that's like the minimum. That's the first reward tier, aside from just like the $1 support, is a $16 or $16 early bird, $18 buy-in, which is just you get the game when it comes out and you get your name in the credits. Everybody who supports us on that tier minimum gets their name in the credits. And then it continues to go up with additional rewards, like you get a copy of the original soundtrack, which is going to be coming out from our friend Arda Ren, which we talked about. We're going to have an Easter egg and cultural reference chart that we're going to give
which is
people.
Going to be insane.
We're going to have wallpapers. It's going to be so detailed. It's going to be huge. It's going to be a huge digital file. But we're going to have digital wallpapers made by our friend Matthias, and a number of other digital rewards. And then we even have a couple of physical rewards later on, such as t-shirts, which is actually, we gave some t-shirts away at DreamHack, and we're going to do that on Kickstarter as well. And we're also going to have a full hardcover art book that is going to include progress images from the initial sketches that Donald made all the way to the final art that we've done. The references, full of those. It's going to be the woodblock prints that we had color references for, all of that sort of thing, and anything that people who are really into art like. And then the last thing that I want to talk about in terms of rewards, which I think is going to be, is my favorite, and I suspect will be most appealing to people, is you can actually add your pet to the game if you support us at a certain Kickstarter tier, because as you know, you can go and you can pet the cats in the dojo. We wanted to give supporters the ability to, you can either add your pet to the game, which I will make a custom sprite for them and you can pet them in the game. You can also help make an NPC. You can help make a two-stage mini-boss. You can help make an enemy. There's a lot of different, and those are a little more limited, obviously, because we can't, we can't have a million we can't have a million two-stage mini-bosses in every single area, but we have a couple for people who are willing to support us at that level, which is obviously would be a huge deal for us. Anybody who's willing to support us to that level, we want to show. We do want to put all the cats in. We want everybody.
Although it's not limited.
Any kind
It's
of
not
pet
limited
that
to cats. Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's not limited to cats.
Dogs.
If you've got a dog, I will figure out how to draw a dog.
Fish might be hard.
If you've got a lizard, fish might be hard to pet, but I'll do it.
Lizards are
but yeah, we've got a Blizzards are in, absolutely. We've got a lot of different rewards on the Kickstarter that we're really excited for people to be able to see starting tomorrow. But yeah, so super excited about the Kickstarter options. Really hope people will be excited about it too.
We looked at a lot of
awesome.
like Kickstarters that we've supported and Kickstarters just in general that are like campaigns that looked great, and we were like, okay, so what do people like get excited about? And so we were like, what do people really care about? Like what's interesting? And we kept seeing this thing that was coming up a lot was like, oh, put your name in like a graveyard setting or put your name in a thing.
Yeah,
we were like,
lots of graveyards.
There's a lot of that, but we were like, what's cooler than that? We were like, the cat. Put the cat in the game. So it's like,
and we just knew that would be something that it's not easy for us to do, of course, but it's something that is feasible and is something that we would love. Like we've already put our cats in the game, so we thought I bet that some people would be really interested in doing that if they can. So that's one of the reward tiers. That's actually an add-on even. So if all you want is to buy the game and have your cat in it, you can make your own little bundle like that.
This game is like, we talk about like the difficulty and the one-hit kill. This is actually a cat collection game. This is an app. Do you guys remember this app?
All of it
from a few years ago.
Neko Atsume.
Yeah, Neko Atsume. Do you remember? Did you have this, Mike?
No, okay. I didn't.
Blue, you get the pitch for this. You remember this game.
Oh yeah, it's literally just a mobile game that you buy cat food and you put it out and then you leave the app, and then when you check the app later, cats have come to your yard and you can click them, and then they're in your inventory as pets that you have acquired.
Awesome.
This game is just that, but way more complicated for no reason.
Fighting the bosses is cool. Getting revenge or redemption is cool, but the actual motivator
what really matters is
getting the next cats.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, both. I'm going to be in the show notes in the description. I will be tossing in obviously the Steam links for anyone who wants to jump in. And once again, there is a 60 to 90 minute demo, free to play forever. You can jump in there, check out 1,000 Cuts. I'll also obviously be throwing in the Kickstarter for anyone who wants to join along with the community, who wants to help support the game and just learn a little bit more about both of you, the game, everything that's going on. But is there anywhere else that you would want people to kind of find you at? Anywhere else for anyone who wants to join in on the community, the discussion?
Absolutely.
Where else? What's the best place to find you?
If you go to BanjoToadStudio.com, that'll just take you to all of our links, basically, and it'll have it's got our socials, it's got our Instagram, our TikTok, our Twitter. We've got a Discord. We're most active on Instagram, but we're getting into and Kara too. But yeah, hit up BanjoToadStudio.com. Follow us on all the things. You'll get access to info super fast. You'll see behind the scenes stuff. We post a lot of like, oh, this is the art we're working on right now, or like this is an update to some art we did. We did I think what was it? We just posted some like new behind the scenes of the Bandit Village pretty recently on Instagram. So it's like, if you're interested in progress, if you're interested in learning more, or even like game development, all of those places are the places to be. Just because I feel like we're in kind of a small group of people where it's like first-time programmers, first-time game developers. We're doing the thing, So if you're interested,
we also have
come on, we'll talk.
We also have like we said, we like building up our community. We like having a group that we can really interact with and get to know. And we're currently doing we're hosting a Draw This in Your Style type event where if anybody who's interested in doing that, that's most active on Instagram. Cool. Where you can draw anything from the game that you like, or any art inspired by the game. We have had some incredibly cool submissions of enemies that people loved in the demo, or just characters that people have made themselves that are like, wouldn't it be so cool if this was a character in the game? And
we had two people do submissions that were like world building in their own universes that were like inspired by 1,000 Cuts. We were like, this is so cool. It was like mind blowing,
and we love seeing that. But the special thing about that art competition that's happening right now is whoever wins that competition is going to get pushed up one Kickstarter tier. So if they don't support the game at all, they get the game for free, and if they do support the game, then they get whatever the next tier is.
That might be a super
because we
foolish
just want
decision.
people to be able to be involved in it.
because it's like
Now,
we might just be giving somebody like $800 basically if they like do like the one right before the top tier. Oh man,
listen, it'll be worth it if they support us enough to make all that art. It's totally worth it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but we want to support the community as much as they support us. So
that's awesome. Well, I think that's it, everyone.
Yeah.
Once again, I
feel
just
like we did it.
want to say thank you. Want to
Good job, Mike.
congratulate you both and the whole team on the Kickstarter launch. And with that, just wishing you guys all nothing but continued success. And again, looking forward to following along on this
Thanks,
journey.
Mike.
Thank you both, Donald. Thank you, Blue, and
you.
for everyone, thank you for joining in. Thank you everyone for stopping by. And with that, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Ciao.
Okay.